This is Bite Size History with the Saints. Hey everyone, it's Megan.
And it's Bradley here.
So, we last night made a very cool dish.
Yeah,
I actually really enjoyed it.
I absolutely hated it.
It's kind of disappointing that we're this separate on this because
Yeah,
this rarely happens.
it's rare, but that's because we're two individuals.
Oh, I don't believe that. I think we're actually symbiotic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I need some nutrients. Give it to me.
So, anyways, the recipe was specifically um, venison steaks with a Quixote squash salad. So a lot of this was actually really new to us. Like I've had venison. Well, I think we both have had venison before.
I've had venison a lot.
Yes, because you're a redneck.
Hey,
But I've had ground venison before. I've never had it in like steak form. So it was definitely a little bit of a different experience for me. And it kind of reminded me of beef, just more gamey beef.
yeah.
But the coyote squash was different for both of us.
It looked like pears.
Yeah.
I got kind of excited when she, showed them to me, and I was like, "Ooh, I get a pear." And then I was like, "But isn't this supposed to be for the dinner?" And she goes, "These are squashes." And I said, "No, they're not. They're pears." We cut them up, and they were not pears.
He's still very disappointed by all of
I
it.
really want a pear.
But what ended up happening with them, they're really I think they're tasty. They're a little bit sweeter.
Yeah, see, for me, they were overly sweet.
So I think that's something that I did accidentally. So one of the things that anybody who is a chef in this world will know, if you add salt to tomatoes, it brings out the sweetness of the tomato.
See, I didn't eat a tomato.
You just ate the squash part.
I just ate a squash part, and the squash, maybe the tomato, leaked onto the
Well, and
squash.
also I wonder if the salt part did that too.
Maybe. I don't know. It was overly sweet, disgustingly so.
See, I thought it tasted like zucchini.
And yeah, I can see the zucchini taste, or I could taste the zucchini taste. It did have a little bit of that taste to it, but for me, it was just overpowering. Oh, it was too sweet.
That's a master's degree, people. Yeah, like I don't know. I can see that a little bit. I guess I found with the more strong flavors of the venison, it balanced out for me. Like I never ate the squash salad on its own. I
Yes.
always ate it with like a chunk of meat.
And see, I always try everything on its own, and then I try it together.
And maybe that's why we had differing feelings
Maybe,
on it.
maybe if you would have tried it by itself, but see, even with the venison, I didn't care for it.
Yeah.
It still was just way too sweet.
Yeah. So I mean, but to be honest though, the recipe was really, really easy. Um, so the squash, we kind of had a bit of a journey trying to find what squash to have because when we were doing this recipe, the archaeological records, it literally just says squash. No one specifies on different species because we don't really think of those things like that.
No, and that's the problem is that, it's like that meme, squash is squash.
So it led us down this wormhole of trying to figure out which ones were accessible. And like we started with zucchini because I love zucchini.
Mhm.
Zucchini, however, was cultivated by the Italians, but it is
It's a descendant.
yeah, it's a descendant of the Chayote, but it's still not what we wanted.
Yeah, it's not proper, and it comes well after the time period we're looking at.
And then like a lot of the yellow squash, there's actually two different species of it. There's the straight neck and the curved neck. And the curved neck is in East Coast North America, and the straight neck actually started being cultivated in Europe. So they were both out.
Yeah.
So it kind of became, what do we go from there? The Coyote technically was cultivated in by they say the Aztecs and Mayans. So there's no definitive proof that the Olmecs also would have eaten it based on the timelines.
But there's no non-definitive proof either.
Exactly. And I love those gray areas.
And unfortunately, that's what large chunks of archaeology are, is taking what evidence we do have and piecing it together. And I say unfortunately, I really enjoy that part. I love puzzles, and archaeology is just one big puzzle. It's taking tidbits of knowledge that you can glean from the archaeological record and making something of that to actually fit into the rest of the puzzle that you're looking at.
It kinda makes you think back to, like, your dissertations where you would use experiences that we had in, like, more modern cultures.
Yeah, using ethnographic.
Yep.
And that's something that some parts of archaeology don't think has any place in archaeology, but the problem is that people are people. We have always been us, and by using ethnographic evidence, it helps, but it's a whole nother debate.
Yeah, one of these episodes when we're not doing bite-sized history, I might actually give you a chance to explain to people kind of the entire realm of archaeological views on things and how you differ from them.
So you want 3 hours of me ranting?
I do want 3 hours of you ranting.
I will rant.
So that's the big part of this week's recipe. When we talk about, like, the having deer versus, like, some of the other things like we had talked about before, like dog, for instance. With the Olmec, they did focus a lot more on hunting and fishing than they did on eating, like, domesticated animals in the area, and this is mostly due to what they were doing at that time.
But deer was typically reserved for the upper echelons, along with the other foods.
Yeah, dog and alligator.
Yeah. I mean, dog, you kind of figure, okay, that should be everybody's food. Deer, takes a little bit of effort to get to it. But an alligator, you go, okay, yeah, no.
It's extreme.
I mean, but that's the thing is like, it's always funny. They probably sent out somebody going, once you take and you hunt this alligator, you'll become a real man. And some dumb teenager had to go out there, kill the alligator, and then didn't even get a feast on it more than likely.
Exactly, it probably just went to whoever was the chieftain.
Yeah. And that's a sad reality of humankind.
Doesn't say that's history in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, that's still happening to the day.
Those kids who work at McDonald's, they end up having to.
Well, it's like the people that literally go out on the fishing boats
Yeah,
and they catch these, like marlin and whatnot, and they can't necessarily afford to purchase that meat,
that's true.
but you've got the rich people that do purchase it, so it forces this economy of yet again the poor serving the rich. And here we go into Bradley's
Welcome to our capitalism complaint hour. So talking a bit more about the Olmec. The Olmec were relatively similar to what we have known about that area. Some of the big differences with them are simply they focused more on smaller villages. They did have larger cities, but they seem to be more ritualistic with like the more elites living there, a mound surrounding or a mound being the center of the area. So it's kind of they're similar, but they're quite different from the Mayans and the Aztec in that sense.
yeah. But I mean, that's the thing is they were a whole different culture.
Yeah,
And
and they came before both of them.
yeah. So it's like, the Aztecs were different than the Mayans. They all share similarities, but there are differences, and there always will be differences.
Yeah. Well, and the Olmec are most famous for those stone heads. I think when everyone thinks of the Olmec, they think of that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, that's my first image as an archaeologist even is the Olmec heads
They did have an early version of language. They had about 400.
written.
Yeah, sorry, written language.
But say, I'm pretty sure they could speak.
They're mute and they just clap a lot. No, they did have
And
a
that's technically a form of language.
that is okay.
So,
This is what happens when when I say pedantic, the actual professionals here. So yeah, but they had a written language about 450 glyphs, which based on their similarities to the Mayan languages and other Mesoamerican um written glyphs, we kind of go with the idea this is almost like the mother culture.
basically, the Olmec started it, the Mayans and the Aztecs built on top of it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that we did with English or whatever language you speak.
Yeah.
The language you speak to this day is going to have some similarities to the language that was spoken in the past, but it's not going to be identical.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun part about being a human in general, is the idea that we're always continuing to build on what was already there.
Yeah. And that's what makes us unique is that ability to continue the building blocks of us and, taking that technology that somebody else developed and developing more on top of it. And that's what, humanity is in a nutshell.
Well, and that's why some people feel as if we are starting to decline as humans because we're not building as much unique things. But I think we are. I think people just don't notice it as blatantly anymore.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that you're always going to have those people that say, humans are devolving or humans are in a decline. And the simple fact of the matter is no. I mean, we are more populous now than we've ever been, and that doesn't make us any dumber. It just means that there's more of us. And that leads to a whole new issues of resources, of, how much land do we actually have to actually support these people? And it's just another thing that humanity, because of the way we are and our drive to survive, our need to survive, we're going to have to sit there and see what we develop to combat these new issues that are being presented to us. The problem with humanity is we often tend to develop things to combat these issues to only support select groups of people. We don't do this to support everybody. And unfortunately, probably going to see quite a bit of that with whatever technologies we develop. You're going to see certain countries getting the technology before other countries, and those other countries are going to have to fight tooth and nail to prove that they deserve that technology, which they do because they are human. And it's the same thing that we've gone through for our whole
I
existence.
was gonna say, it kind of reminds me of the COVID vaccine when it first started being rolled out.
Yeah. I mean, there's still areas of the world that still are struggling to get the vaccine. And it's because, countries like the United States, I'm not going to get into the whole part of it, but, a lot of the vaccines just went to waste.
Yeah.
And there's countries that desperately want the vaccine. And you've got the richer countries hoarding and then just going, well, no, nobody else can use this, so throw it away. And that's the problem with humanity. And that's why we get so many of the dystopian movies, is because at the end of the day, humans are fascinating. We are amazingly adaptive, but humans are trash. And we have that drive to survive, but we've got that drive to survive for us and ours. We don't have that drive to survive for others. And occasionally we will see an outpouring of support, but it takes something dramatic. And you'll see this outpouring of support, and then it just disappears so quickly because we have very short attention spans and something else captivates our fancy. We then move to that and go, okay, well, that problem's done. It's gone. It's solved. And the problem isn't solved. It's still there. But humans are horrible. For all the great things that we are horrible. And we will do everything in our power to destroy anything and everyone else to make sure that we are the ones that are surviving. And by we, I mean you, not just like, we as in the royal we. You want to make sure that your lineage is continued on. You want to make sure that your, legacy is secured. And if that means destroying others to do it, you will. And that's just sad. Good
This
God, that's gonna have to get cut, isn't it?
No, I was gonna say, Brad's Magneto speech for the week number 4 in a row. Um, but it's actually a good segue into how the Olmec culture dissolved, because we do know that they mysteriously, quote unquote, um, stopped existing around 400 BCE. But we have quite a bit of information about like what likely happened. Like we know that there was warfare happening.
Mhm.
We know that they likely assimilated into other cultures in that area.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that it's it was the assimilation forced? We don't know. Was it a willing? We don't know. We can look through ethnographic material and go, okay, there's times that there have been forced assimilation and there's times that it's been willing assimilation. And, it's one of those things that, yet again, if it benefits our group, then we're going to do it.
I'd
And if that
say,
means destroying the other group because of resources, then we'll destroy the other group because of resources. If that means assimilating the other group because they've got resources and we want them, and the only way to get them is by bringing them into our fold, then we will.
yeah, I'd want to assume it's kind of a column A, column B. Some people, especially with the Olmec being a lot of small villages and such, might have just willingly joined other groups because they felt as if the main system maybe was not doing as well.
Yeah.
And they would have gone to other groups and kind of assimilated in there, whereas others were forcibly done.
Well, and it's always this possibility that they seen themselves as individuals that were part of a larger group that came together to celebrate events, but ultimately they were their own thing and they just happened to share a similar culture. And that's always a good possibility. And then from, that they sat there and said, okay, well, we're part of them, but we're not part of them. And this other group, I like what they're showing, so let's go be part of them.
You can't sit here.
Yeah.
Mean Girls references.
But it's that's one of the issues with, you know, looking at cultures through archaeology is we don't know what those people, unless they wrote it down, what they were thinking exactly at that point in time. And even when they write it down, especially, you know, up until recently, when, vast majority of people didn't know how to read or write, it wasn't important for normal everyday people to write stuff down because they were just trying to survive. And you had the rich that wrote the stuff down, so we get the perspectives that they give. And through that, we will tend to only get, you know, very narrowed perspectives of a time period. And that's where archaeology steps in because archaeology can help fill those gaps. But archaeology is also very biased when it comes to certain things as well. And that's something that in recent years we've started to recognize and have started to try to correct. And recently, everybody has the ability to pick up a phone and just start typing whatever they want. And, in 100, 200, 300 years, it's going to be a treasure trove for archaeologists because we're going to have this unprecedented amount of material to actually go off of. And that's saying that all the data and everything is still there. But it's a turning point for archaeology because we're no longer having to sit there and try to guess and go, okay, well, this looks like a domicile that might have been for, lower income people. Now we can sit there and, look at actual records. So it's a whole nother thing.
It's gonna be nice because one of the big things that I know happens quite a bit with, like, archaeological record and historical record, women and children were often left out.
Well, yeah, because up until recently, most archaeologists were men. They were rich, white, old men. And they didn't want to acknowledge their wife or children at home, so why would they acknowledge them in the archaeological record? And now we actually have this huge influx of women into the workforce. And it's amazing because it's forcing this change. It's forcing this perspective that needs to be there. And I absolutely love the fact that a lot of stuff is starting to get relooked at, especially by women, because, they've been marginalized and forgotten about for so long in the record.
Well, and that was one of the big reasons why we started doing this food blog in the first place, because a lot of food history is tied to women,
Yeah.
regardless if we want it to be or not. And because of that, there's not a lot of documentation. Like, there are a few white papers, but when it comes to, true documents that people can generally read, it's very lacking. And that's kind of where this passion came in for us because one, we love food. We eat a lot of food. Um, I love food. But also we enjoy cooking and we enjoy the exploration. And even though I don't have the background in archaeology, I love doing this with him.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, this is something everybody can do,
Mhm,
and hopefully through the podcast, the blog, the cookbook we're putting out, it gets more people involved, and it gets people wanting to learn more about this.
for sure. Well, in a small segue, because I know we're heading to the end of the podcast for this week, the Kickstarter has hit 5%, so
Mhm.
we are getting there. I recommend if you haven't checked it out yet to definitely look at it. We are doing pretty well. We definitely have more to go. We still have about 54 days left in the campaign,
Yeah.
so I think we can hit it.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get there,
Yeah.
and, you get yourself a cookbook, and you can start making these amazingly horrible recipes like what we had today last night.
See, he says horrible, I do not. But again, that's part of the fun of all of this is sometimes history was kind of bland.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is that my taste buds are different than your taste buds.
Exactly.
And we enjoy a lot of the same foods, but there's a lot of the same foods that we don't enjoy together.
Well, and as always, I think one thing that people sometimes forget when it comes to like cookbooks, it's just kind of a fun game. Like you can follow the instructions, you understand the basis, but if you really like spice, instead of using the poblanos that we used, use jalapenos.
Yeah. Use what you want. That's the beautiful thing about cooking. This is experimentation for us to sit there and go through and help people understand where your food came from, but you don't have those limitations.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. And that's the great thing is if you want to take and, draw from all of human history, draw from all of human history. You already are when you cook.
It's just no, it's getting that knowledge of where you're drawing it from
Yeah.
and it getting to acknowledge that this didn't exist there, but this did.
Yeah.
It's that new perspective about your food that really we're trying to offer.
Exactly.
So, well, that's really it for this week. So we're gonna get back to it, get some planning for the Aztec meal coming up.
Yeah.
And
Figure out what meat we're gonna do then.
yeah, I think we're gonna get duck, but I
Mm.
have to get a very specific type of duck.
We'll let you know more about that next week.
So have a fantastic week and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.